Hello there, and welcome to Lecture 4, Introduction to Scenes and Game Objects in Unity 3D. We will also take a look at the camera GameObject. Before doing this, I will give you the solution to the assigned homework that I gave you at the end of the Lecture 3. Okay, so go to your browser and go to the downloadable materials section and click on Homework Lecture 3. Okay, click it and then open it up. Open it. As you can see here, I assigned you a homework that is to create two folders, a fonts folder and an animation folders into your assets parent folder. Okay, so if you want, pause the video now and try to do it yourself. Okay, let's do it. Double click on Unity icon and wait for it to open. Fine. Now we're here in our project that we created in last lecture. Go to assets. Okay, this is your primary or your main folder. Right click it, create new folder and call it fonts. We will store any downloaded fonts into this folder. Again, right click on assets, create folder and call this materials. Alright, here we will store all of our materials. Okay, good. So now lecture 4 starts. Introduction to scenes and game objects and the camera game object. Okay, so what is a scene? Scenes contain the object of your game. Okay, so one scene contains all of the objects of your game. If, for example, you're creating a first-person shooter, you will want to create one scene for each stage and one scene for your main menu, for example. So you can easily create a scene just going to File and clicking on New Scene. Okay, so if you click it, now you are into a new scene. Okay, now the title of this scene is Untitled, as you can see here at the top of the Unity 3D program. Okay, Untitled. So that means that you must save this scene to not lose those changes you make to this scene. So go to File, Save Scene, and now this window opens up and asks you for a location to save this scene. This is where our scenes folder we created in the last video comes into play. So double click on scene and save this scene with a logical name. Okay, so for example, call this scene play and click save. Be sure to give a descriptive name. If we were creating a menu, I could give here the name menu, okay, or maybe main menu. But in this scene we will be creating our game. Okay, so I will give it play. Fine, save it, and now if you double click in this folder, you will see the play scene here. Okay, so that's it. I hope you understood what a scene is. If you have further questions, please send me a message, okay, or ask me in the forums or anywhere. Fine. We will now talk about game objects. Know that every object inside your game is a game object. In order for those objects to perform actions and or have any external appearance, for example a dock, for example to display a dock, we will need to add components to that game object. Depending on what kind of object you want to create, you will add different combinations of components to that GameObject. Okay. For example, if you go to GameObject and create an empty GameObject, a new GameObject appears here at the hierarchy window or hierarchy view. Okay. You can change its name here at this text box. For example, type in my new GameObject, and as you can see here, the name has changed to whatever you put here. Okay, fine. One important thing, the transform component is added automatically to any new GameObject, and it cannot be deleted from that GameObject. So that transform sets the position in the X, Y, and Z of our GameObject. Okay. So if you change the X position axis, it will change its X position, and so it will if you change the Y and Z positions. Okay. Fine. You can also change its rotation values and its scale values. Fine. That transfer component allows us for parenting. You may be asking what parenting is. Okay, so let me explain you what is parenting. Okay? Good. Parenting, as the name says, is allowing for GameObject to contain several childs or sub GameObjects. For example, call this container. Okay, and now go to GameObject and create a cube. Okay, and now again repeat the process. Go to create other cube. Now here you have two cubes with the same name. You can change those names. For example, for the first cube I will call it cube 1. For the second cube I will call it cube 2. Okay, and as you can see here, they have default X, Y, and Z position. Okay, and it is the same by default. Okay, you can, for example, put here in the cube 1 X position, put 0, 0, and 0 positions. Okay, now the same for cube 2, 0, 0, and 0. Okay, now change the position of cube 2 along the X axis a little bit so that you can distinguish them here in the game layout, in the game window. Fine. Now drag and drop. Well, change that container position as well and put it in the X0, Y0, and Z0 position. Okay, fine. Now drag and drop the cube 1 to the container and the cube 2 to the container also. Fine. Now, as you can see here, I have my two cubes. If I move this cube, then this cube will move, but the other cube will not move because cube 2 is not a child of cube 1. So I can move the childs independently, okay, on one another. But if I move the parent, that is container in this case, both childs will move with it. Okay, so the position of the parent is absolute to the world transform position. Okay, but the transform components of this child are referenced to the parent transform position. Okay, so I think that's it about transform component. Okay, so change this to 2D again. Sorry for that. Okay, here we have it. Sorry. Fine. here we have cube 1 and cube 2. Fine. We will delete this because we will not be needing it anymore. Fine. So we talked about transfer component, and there are a lot of components. The next thing we're going to talk about is cameras. What is a camera? By default, when you create a new project, a new camera is created. Okay? And this default camera is known as main camera. Okay? A camera capture and display a specific region of your scene. So you can also add as many cameras as you want. Okay? So in one scene you can have unlimited number of cameras. You can have up to infinite cameras if you want to. Okay? If you click on this camera, remember, a camera is also a game object. Okay? A game object with 5 components. We'll not be looking at those 5 components, just to the camera one. Okay? And we will focus on the projection option and the size option in those 2 options. Okay? So what does the projection option do? If you click here and this is spinner, and a list will show up and give you 2 options: perspective or orthographic. Okay? Here, as we're creating 2D games, we're not interested in the perspective camera. Okay? We're not interested in this option. If we go to 3D, we can see is the camera is set to perspective mode. Okay? If I create, for example, a cube, if I go to GameObject, create another, and click cube, and place this cube here, as you can see here in the game window, as you can see here, the cube has a depth, a width, and a height. Okay, but if I set my main camera to orthographic, okay, the cube, okay, let's see what happens here. Wait, okay, here we have the cube. Okay, now the cube has no depth. Okay, we couldn't see the cube because the cube was out of this box. If I drag this cube out of the box, you see here the cube is out of this box, which is called the size of the camera. If any object is outside of this region, we will not see that object on the screen. Say, for example, on the screen device of your mobile phone. So we must place that object inside this region. Okay? Fine. So the orthographic option will render objects uniformly with no sense of perspective. For example, if I change the cube theta value or C value, we will not see that the object is going back or front. Okay? If we change this to perspective instead, and we change this C value, we will see how the theta position is changing on the game window. Okay, so let's change the projection to orthographic again. Now we're not getting any depth values. Okay, why is this cube disappearing at certain point if I go on decreasing the theta value? This is because if I switch to 3D mode here and click on the camera, you can see that the camera have a box, and it will render any objects that are inside that box. For example, the cube is being rendered here because it is inside that box, but if I put this cube out of the box, we'll not be seeing any object. Okay? I will put it back inside it. Okay, anyway, for example, if I if I get this cube and put it here at the limiting top position and go to the main camera, we can see here as it is in the limiting upper plane of this box. Can you see it? Fine. So let's change the projection to, well, it's already in orthographic. Let's change to the mode again. Okay, we can freely move this object, as you can see. For example, as we're creating 2D games, we will add an empty game object, and we will add a new rendering component called sprite render. Okay, which has 5 options: sprite, color, material, certain layer, and origin layer. Okay, we'll take a look at those 3 last properties later. We will center our focus on sprite, which is set to none because it has no sprite inside it. We will put this to 0, 0, 0. It is a good practice to put those values to 0 whenever you create a new game object. Okay, so 0, 0, 0. Fine. Inside that sprite, I will put this zombie sprite that I downloaded, and I will put this sprite as a downloadable material of this lecture 4. Okay, don't worry, you can download it. So I will drag and drop. Here's zombie texture that is inside, that I put inside my assets textures folder. I will drag it to this sprite box, and as you can see here, I can now see my zombie. Okay, and I can rotate it as much as I want. Okay, I can, for example, scale it at X, Y instead of position. Okay, 1, 1, 0, 0. Okay, it is, as I said before, it is a good practice to put to 0 those X and Y positions. Okay, whenever you create a new game object. I can check this name, for example, the zombie. Okay, game camera. The last property I want to cover in this lecture is the size. Okay, the size property of the camera component. Okay, so as you can see here, if I change the size, I'm changing the size of this random box. Okay, so if I put this back to 5, and if I change this, for example, to a landscape, landscape 844 by 480 landscape mode. If I put it to this resolution and change the main camera size, you can see here that the lesser I make it, the smaller this box will be. Okay, so we will see in greater detail what size is really, and why this size property is helpful. Okay, but for now, just keep in mind, if I change this size property, the box will change its size. If I change the projection from orthographic to perspective, I will be able to create 3D games. Okay, instead of 2D ones. I change it back to orthographic. Alright, I think that's all for this lecture. So that's it. Okay, that's all for this lecture. So I hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you in the next lecture. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.